After living in separate rooms for over a year, his wife suddenly told him she was pregnant. When he saw the test results, the man was utterly confused. Miu Kanza was a full-time housewife, often preparing snacks and meals at home to entertain her husband's colleagues who he brought home unexpectedly. Despite her efforts, her husband never thanked her and even scolded her when she accidentally broke a glass or got a colleague's surname wrong. Her best friend, having recovered from a divorce, invited her to celebrate the opening of her new store, which had been long planned. Miu Kanza wasn't envious. Instead, she was lost in thought about her friend's son. She didn't understand why her husband always looked disgusted before coming home, and why he'd say he didn't ask her to wait when he saw the meals she had prepared. Seeing her husband in a bad mood, Miu Kanza held back what she had prepared to say until the next morning when her husband felt unwell. She earnestly asked if he wanted to take a day off, but he impatiently said it was impossible and urged her to quickly say what she wanted to talk about the day before. Carefully, Miu Kanza said she would attend her friend's opening on Friday, but promised to be home by 5 p.m. She also mentioned that she was planning to have a child and had checked her basal body temperature to predict the best time for conception. Her husband's indifferent comment to let nature take its course deeply disappointed her. Her heartbreak escalated when, on her way to her friend's celebration, her husband called to say he forgot a document at home. Ignoring her plans, he demanded she bring it to him immediately and hung up. Miu Kanza hurried home, changed her clothes because she felt they were inappropriate, and rushed to his office. Just after greeting a colleague, her husband arrived, having already had a subordinate reprint the document. He complained about why she was late and criticized her for making his subordinate do extra work. As he left, he coldly commented on her needing to pay more attention to her appearance next time. A disheartened Miu Kanza took the bus home, pondering when their relationship had become like this. At first, they loved and supported each other. They joked that they were a couple who cried easily. Now, only Miu Kanza cries alone. Lost in thought, she missed her bus stop. By chance, she ended up at her old school. Seeing the lively kids there briefly lifted her spirits. At the library, she unexpectedly met an old classmate, Ryou Fuyutsuki. It was their first meeting since graduation. Ryou Fuyutsuki, now a business owner and still single, chatted with her, not minding her married status. They lost track of time, nearly causing Miu Kanza to miss her evening bus. Before boarding, Ryou Fuyutsuki shared his plans to build a school in Africa. Seeing Miu Kanza before leaving was the best gift for him. This chance meeting could have been a perfect ending. The next day, Miu Kanza discussed having children with her husband. She explained she quit her job to prepare for pregnancy. Her husband thought she wanted a child because she was idle. Miu Kanza realized he wanted her to quit just to be a full-time housewife. Now, struggling with his salary, he took his frustrations out on her. Feeling lost, she inadvertently ran to the school library. Regaining her senses, she realized she shouldn't fantasize. As she was leaving, she saw Ryou Fuyutsuki talking to the librarian. Panicking, Miu Kanza felt she shouldn't have such thoughts and fled. Unexpectedly, Ryou Fuyutsuki saw her and chased after her, offering her childhood candy. Back then, when her family was poor, he taught her that eating candy was an excuse to cry. Just like now, Miu Kanza felt repressed but couldn't express it. Ryou Fuyutsuki invited her to help at his flea market, where she could showcase her talent for embroidering bookmarks. Her husband, seeing the poster by accident, pretended to be unaware and asked her if she was busy that day. Miu Kanza lied, saying she was free, and he didn't comment further, but he canceled his golf to follow her. From a distance, he saw Miu Kanza selling bookmarks and watching children with envy. He didn't confront her and simply walked away. After the event, Ryou Fuyutsuki bid farewell to Miu Kanza as he was leaving for Africa the next day. It was then that he revealed that she was his first love. After they parted, Miu Kanza couldn't help but cry. When she got home, her husband unexpectedly apologized, admitting he had been neglecting her. Despite her objections, he forced himself on her, and after a tumultuous night, he was still asleep while Miu Kanza caught the early bus to school. Sitting on a bench at school, looking lifeless, she was startled by a noise nearby. Approaching, she saw Ryou Fuyutsuki stealthily picking a lock. The two sneaked into the library, where he revealed he was searching for a treasure hidden in a bookmark within a book. Miu Kanza discovered it was the bookmark she had lost years ago. Ryou confessed he had taken it, hoping to meet her again but never did. In the next moment, he embraced her tightly, leading to a more profound connection. Before leaving, Ryou returned the bookmark to her and promised to visit frequently. Miu Kanza's days continued as usual, cooking and cleaning, but they were no longer dull. Ryou regularly sent her updates from Africa, always bringing a smile to her face. Feeling nauseous from the smell of stew, she visited a doctor who confirmed her pregnancy. Fearing her husband's reaction, Miu secretly contacted a company online to determine the father of the child. On the day she received the test results, two pieces of news deeply unsettled her. The child was not her husband's, and Ryou Fuyutsuki was listed as a casualty in an explosion in Africa. Deciding to keep Ryou's final gift, even if it meant becoming a villain, she went home and told her husband about her pregnancy. Her husband did not suspect anything, as they had not been intimate for years, except for that one drunken night. He vividly remembers being intimate with his wife, yet his face showed no sign of happiness. He continued to treat Miu Kanza with his usual cold indifference, a behavior she had grown accustomed to. Like always, she bought a bouquet of flowers and visited her hospitalized mother, fearing to reveal her pregnancy. Her mother instantly noticed her daughter's distress, in stark contrast to her indifferent husband. Miu Kanza was grappling with a question. Could she maintain this lie for a lifetime, or should she confess to her husband? She found no answer to her dilemma. The next morning, her best friend brought over her child for Miu to look after. The child hid behind his mother, frightened by Miu. Uncharacteristically, her husband forced a smile and interacted with the child. Miu apologized at the door, worried her husband might disapprove of the early visit, but he seemed not to hear and did not respond. Her friend admired Miu for seeing her husband off every day, unaware of Miu's inner turmoil. As the friend was leaving and about to greet him, she noticed him painfully clutching his neck, wondering if he was ill. In reality, Miu did not truly understand her husband. To outsiders, he was a high-ranking corporate executive. To his boss, he was merely a workhorse, bearing the brunt of any uncompleted tasks. His subordinates saw him as a fool, tirelessly helping them meet deadlines. His mental state was severely depleted from constant stress, unnoticed by his wife but pointed out by a coffee shop owner. The owner remarked that some wounds don't hurt until they are seen, which triggers the brain to feel the pain acutely. Although this was part of the owner's spiel to attract customers, the husband shared his unspoken grievances with him. It turned out he had always deeply loved Miu Kanza since their first meeting. Miu Kanza saw him sweating profusely and considerately pulled out a handkerchief to wipe his sweat. Over the years, the handkerchief had turned yellow, but he still carried it with him. However, he was not adept at being a husband. Caught between his superiors and subordinates at work, he unwittingly took out his frustrations on Miu Kanza at home. Unbeknownst to him, Miu Kanza was preoccupied with Ryou Fuyutsuki, trying to find someone who could contact him. She looked at the bookmark they had recently found, recalling Ryou Fuyutsuki's promise to return to see her. During a prenatal checkup, the doctor told her that the baby was healthy, making Miu Kanza grateful as if the child was a gift left by Ryou Fuyutsuki. Her best friend, seeing her often downcast, mistakenly thought it was due to first-time pregnancy nerves and patiently shared how transitioning from a woman to a mother was a profound change, emphasizing how strong maternal love is and how any difficulty can be endured for the sake of a child. Deeply moved, Miu Kanza called her mother to thank her for raising her alone under difficult circumstances. Her mother, sensing something was wrong, assured her firmly that she would always be by her side no matter what happened. Consequently, Miu Kanza resolved to draft a divorce agreement and planned to raise her unborn child alone. That evening, as her husband returned home and Miu Kanza was about to confront him, an urgent call forced her to rush to the hospital. After a tumultuous night, her mother's condition finally stabilized. In the morning, she asked her husband to go to work while she stayed to care for her mother. Upon waking, her mother continued the previous day's conversation, downplaying her solo efforts in raising her and mentioning their persistent poverty and hardships. The hospital then demanded payment for her mother's stay, which brought Miu Kanza back to reality. Realizing that raising a child alone was not feasible, back home, as she looked at the divorce papers and a paternity test report, her husband startled her, prompting her to hide them. He seriously pulled her aside to continue the previous night's unfinished conversation, which left the now uncertain Miu Kanza at a loss for words. When her husband asked if they needed to talk about the baby in her womb, and seeing Miu Kanza nod, he inquired if she wanted to keep the child. Recently, he noticed she didn't seem happy and thought it was because of him. He assumed she didn't want the child because it was forced upon her. Miu Kanza quickly clarified that she had no intention of terminating the pregnancy. Then, her husband expressed his thoughts. He was too busy to contribute any effort and hoped she wouldn't expect anything from him except money. He was indifferent whether she wanted to separate bedrooms or hire a nanny. His terms perfectly suited Miu Kanza. He would provide the money and she would handle everything else, especially since the child wasn't his. Later, Miu Kanza filled in her husband's name in the father section of the child's documents, then burned the paternity test and the divorce papers. After a painful labor, Miu Kanza's screams in the delivery room heralded the birth of a new life. The baby's cries marked its arrival. Miu Kanza didn't know whether Ryou Fuyutsuki was still alive at that moment. He and a colleague had been caught in an air raid. The colleague died, and the body was unrecognizable. The remaining identification belonged to Ryou Fuyutsuki, which made the news. However, the person who was rescued was his colleague, who only realized later that the mix-up involved Ryou Fuyutsuki. The man earns money to support the family while his wife stays home with the child. However, the child is from the wife's first love, unbeknownst to Hiroki Kanzaki. Since her first sight of her husband and seeing the child cry uncontrollably, Miu Kanza began to doubt Hiroki's affection for children. When they left the hospital, Hiroki unexpectedly left work early, helping her pack and handle the discharge in an uncharacteristic manner. Upon returning home and seeing the baby supplies all over the table, Miu's perception of him changed. To thank him for his contributions, she decided to let him name the child, explaining that her own name was a gift from her father. Although they soon divorced, the name remains a constant reminder of her father's presence. She also assured Hiroki that she would keep the promise to raise the child alone without affecting his work. Hearing this, Hiroki appeared tense. Miu resolved to treat the child as Hiroki's own, unaware that at that moment, Ryou Fuyutsuki had just returned to Japan. He and a female colleague visited the younger brother of a deceased colleague who showed visible disappointment. Initially told his brother had survived with severe injuries, only to learn a month later there was a mistake and his brother had died. Seeing Ryou alive felt like a slap, reminding him of his brother, prompting him to dismiss them. The error originated from the female colleague's selfish act, as she allowed the police to misidentify the survivor, even though she knew Ryou was being resuscitated. Ryou comforted her, saying confusion in such situations was normal, and expressed his intention to keep visiting on behalf of his colleague, despite the brother's reluctance. At noon, he ate the ramen he had promised to eat upon returning to Japan. Walking on the overpass, he remembered his first love, Miu Kanza. He was unaware that Miu was overwhelmed with her new responsibilities. Her first attempt at caring for the child was frantic. A friend brought over some spare baby items, and during their meeting, she mentioned that the child did not resemble the father at all. They also discussed one morning when Hiroki seemed unwell. This is a side of Hiroki Kanzaki that Miu Kanza never knew about. There's still a lot she doesn't know. Each night, Hiroki quietly checks on the child, touching the baby's delicate face. The sounds the child makes scare him away, and he quickly retreats to his study to look up meanings of names online. The next day, Hiroki presents a list of carefully selected names, each with its meaning explained, giving their child a name that means not to lose direction. Miu Kanza and her in-laws visit a temple to pray for the child. The in-laws had just complained about Hiroki not participating in such a major event, but Miu had just explained that he was too busy with work when Hiroki suddenly appeared, pushing his mother-in-law in a wheelchair. Hiroki's change touched Miu's heart, and it pained her to see that he had learned how to soothe the child, a task she struggled with, as Hiroki easily put the crying baby to sleep. Miu casually remarked, "You've changed a lot," to which Hiroki seriously replied that he was sorry for bringing his work stress home and taking it out on her previously, admitting he hadn't been a good husband. But the birth of their child changed everything for him. Fearing the fragile and tender child might get hurt, he found direction and warmth in her, making him reconsider his previous promises. Hiroki asked Miu for a chance to do what a father should do, a request she couldn't refuse. The next day, Hiroki's expression had changed, his phone's screensaver now a picture of their daughter, and his step more vibrant. At work, he went straight to his manager to resign from his role as project leader, having more important duties now. Although the manager warned that this might cost him his job, Hiroki left without hesitation. Meanwhile, Miu found Hiroki's yellowed handkerchief, recalling how she had used it to wipe his sweat when they first met. Surprised that he still used it after all these years, she was even more moved, realizing Hiroki had always loved her. Hiroki joined her for the child's 1-month checkup, and afterward, Miu Kanza thought about saying goodbye to her past. Miu Kanza placed Ryou Fuyutsuki's bookmark back in its place in the school library, just as she had settled her past secrets. As she turned around, Ryou Fuyutsuki appeared before her. While her husband happily cared for their newborn daughter, he was unaware that his wife was with her first love at that moment. Shocked and thrilled to see her presumed dead first love alive, Miu quickly pushed Ryou away, feeling it was unfair to her reformed husband. Leaving the library, Miu encountered Hiroki Kanzaki, who had come looking for her, making her feel more guilty about her actions. Unable to sleep at night, she searched online in the living room and discovered a recent official correction. The news of Ryou Fuyutsuki's death had been a mistake. Mixed emotions filled her heart. Awakening to find Miu not beside him, Hiroki saw her daydreaming in the living room and approached her with care. After crying, Miu could only hide her feelings. Seeing Hiroki busying himself around her, Miu wished he wouldn't be so kind to her. Since their child's birth, Hiroki had been paying more attention to his wife, even researching postpartum depression online and reassuring Miu to speak up if something was bothering her. He emphasized that work was less important than family, but Miu only expressed her gratitude, leaving Hiroki unsure how to help. The next day, Hiroki sought advice from a cafe owner, learning that his wife might also need someone to talk to about her troubles. For the first time, he visited the shop of Miu's best friend to understand any recent changes in her. The friend envied how well Hiroki treated Miu, but Miu, lying beside Hiroki, was full of worries because Ryou Fuyutsuki had been contacting her. He found her number through a member of a past event, but despite hesitating, Miu dared not answer. Ryou neglected his work, focusing on personal concerns, which upset a female colleague who had long harbored feelings for him without confessing. Using work as an excuse, she reminded him to give up on Miu. Ryou sent a message to Miu, wanting to meet and clarify things. He asked her to meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. under the school's water tower. Although Miu Kanza saw the message, she knew she was now a mother, and it was time to put her past behind her, especially since Hiroki Kanzaki was treating her so well. Ryou Fuyutsuki waited, disheartened, while a female colleague saw this as her chance. Unknown to them, fate kept them connected. The colleague's sponsor was Hiroki Kanzaki's company, inevitably leading Ryou and Hiroki to meet face to face. Miu's best friend invited her for a weekend dinner, and Hiroki took on the role of caring for the child at home. Miu discreetly sought her friend's advice on choosing between her past and present treasures, knowing she couldn't have both. Her friend suggested that since Miu had a new treasure, the old one was merely of sentimental value and offered to take it. During their conversation, a customer appeared. It was Ryou Fuyutsuki, whom Miu wanted but feared to meet. Hearing them mention Miu's child threw Ryou off balance, and he left the shop in a hurry. Miu also found an excuse to end the gathering early. As her friend chased her out with the forgotten cake, she saw Miu making a call while running. The two then met under the school's water tower. Miu confessed to Ryou that she wanted to cherish her current family after having a child, but thanked him for being her light during her darkest times. Hearing this, Ryou wept. As Miu approached to comfort him, he embraced her, a moment witnessed by the pursuing best friend. Miu Kanza's best friend accidentally saw her hugging her first love and immediately told Miu Kanza's husband, unable to let someone she cared about be deceived. Initially, the friend considered keeping the secret forever due to their friendship. However, seeing Miu Kanza's sweet family life almost made her spill the beans. In reality, the encounter between Ryou Fuyutsuki and Miu Kanza was a goodbye hug to end their past. To avoid further complications, Ryou Fuyutsuki even informed the friend that they would no longer collaborate after bumping into Miu Kanza at his shop. The phone call ignited the friend's curiosity, prompting a visit to Miu Kanza's home the next day to inquire if she was troubled. Seeing Miu Kanza unwilling to share, the friend invited her to work at her shop, exceptionally allowing her to bring her child. Miu Kanza agreed after discussing it with Hiroki Kanzaki, although the friend simply wanted to know more about her. Soon, Ryou Fuyutsuki received a call from the friend for a collaboration. Despite his reluctance, he visited her shop. During the visit, the friend subtly hinted at possible infidelity by Ryou Fuyutsuki. Caught off guard and unable to respond, Ryou was confronted when the friend picked up Miu Kanza's child, who was not shy, and tried to hand him to Ryou. Miu Kanza rushed over to take her child back, and Ryou used the moment to excuse himself hastily. The friend, witnessing Miu Kanza's sudden anger, sensed something was amiss with the child. After Ryou Fuyutsuki left, he found himself distraught on a bridge where a female colleague came to comfort him, revealing her feelings for him. Fate had it that his new business partner was Miu Kanza's husband. Seeing his business card and wedding ring left Ryou speechless, but an emergency at the husband's company allowed Ryou a momentary escape from the awkward situation. Due to Hiroki Kanzaki's handling of the emergency, which saved the company a significant loss, headquarters sent a directive to promote Hiroki Kanzaki, removing the previous department head. Before Hiroki Kanzaki could enjoy his happiness for long, his best friend suddenly invited him to a cafe to talk. She confessed her feelings directly to him, and then told him about Miu Kanza's betrayal. Hiroki Kanzaki felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Just when he thought he had found happiness, this secret suffocated him. Back home, his friend's words haunted him every time he looked at Miu Kanza. Even though Hiroki tried to act as if nothing had happened, his troubled expression betrayed him. Eventually, Hiroki couldn't resist and went for a paternity test. He broke down in tears upon seeing the results. During their daughter's 6-month celebration, Hiroki Kanzaki, who should have been happy, burst into tears. The next morning, Miu Kanza found that both her husband and daughter were gone. Hiroki Kanzaki had discovered that his 6-month-old daughter was not his biological child. He took the child to the beach alone, hoping that in the next life they could truly be father and daughter. At home, Miu Kanza searched frantically and finally found the paternity test report showing they were not related by blood. Panicked, she quickly consulted her best friend, who blamed her for the situation. By then, Hiroki Kanzaki was considering suicide, but he underestimated his love for his daughter. By evening, Hiroki Kanzaki returned home calmly, which frightened Miu Kanza. That day, while Miu Kanza was home alone with the child, she received a call from the nursing home. Her mother felt she didn't have much time left and wanted to talk more while she still could. After leaving the nursing home, it was not yet completely dark when Miu Kanza rushed to her friend's shop to pick up her child. Unexpectedly, her meddlesome friend had also called the child's biological father to come. She wanted Miu Kanza to clarify things with Ryou Fuyutsuki herself. At this point, Miu Kanza wanted to set clear boundaries with Ryou Fuyutsuki, emphasizing that this was a private family matter, a marital issue, and none of his business. Ryou Fuyutsuki was also troubled lately. Then, she told her recently returned friend that it was all her own fault and asked her not to involve others anymore. After putting her daughter to bed, Miu Kanza finally had a chance to talk things through with her husband. She explained her infidelity by citing her husband's coldness at the time, which led her to feel disappointed in their relationship. She also mentioned that when she found out she was pregnant, although she considered divorce, as a full-time housewife, financially supporting herself and the child was not feasible. Therefore, when Hiroki Kanzaki offered to only take care of the expenses, she accepted. Unexpectedly, Hiroki Kanzaki became more considerate after their daughter was born. Thus, Miu Kanza decided to stay and raise their daughter together with him. After hearing this, Hiroki Kanzaki remained silent. He only asked who the biological father of the daughter was, but Miu Kanza just looked down silently. Seeing this, Hiroki Kanzaki mistakenly thought his wife was still hiding something for that man. Resolutely, he removed their wedding rings and declared that even in death he would not leave his daughter, but asked his wife to leave. A man, betrayed by his wife, finally drove her out of the house. In an effort to return to normal life, Hiroki Kanzaki hired a nanny for his child and began discussing business with his wife's lover, unaware of Ryou Fuyutsuki's true identity. During their conversation, Hiroki was informed by the nanny that his daughter had suddenly developed a fever. Understanding, Ryou suggested they meet another time. Hiroki briefly delegated his work to a junior at the company before rushing to catch a taxi home. However, no taxis were available. Seeing Hiroki's situation, Ryou offered to drive him home. Noticing Hiroki was no longer wearing his wedding ring, Ryou guessed something had happened with Miu. Hiroki, appreciative of Ryu's thoughtfulness, recalled seeing his wife happy at a flea market he hosted, which had deeply hurt him, as she had never laughed like that with him. As they were about to enter his neighborhood, Ryou unexpectedly saw Miu, who had been driven out, but Hiroki, busy looking for his keys, missed seeing her. Ryou, remembering Miu's previous statement that their marital issues were none of his business, decided not to mention it. The next day, with nowhere to go, Miu visited her mother in a hospice. The doctor allowed her mother, who was nearing the end of her life, to go out with Miu. Miu confessed her infidelity to her mother, who thought she would never see her granddaughter again. Yet, informed by a close friend, the kind-hearted Hiroki brought his daughter to see her grandmother one last time. That night, Miu returned home with Hiroki to rest. A few days later, Miu's mother peacefully passed away in the hospital. At this time, a meddling friend brought over a farewell letter from Ryou Fuyutsuki. The letter stated that he was ready to completely end their relationship. The beautiful memories would be cherished forever in his heart, and he wished for both of them to have a bright future. After everything was settled, Miu Kanzaki sincerely thanked the kind Hiroki Kanzaki, and then proposed that she would move out of the house soon. However, Hiroki Kanzaki said he would be the one to leave, only if his wife would confess who the father of their daughter was. Unfortunately, she constantly protected the other man. In fact, Hiroki felt happier seeing his wife hold their daughter than holding her himself. Once they had made up their minds, they planned to divorce. However, neither wanted to separate deep down, and both avoided discussing the divorce. Not wanting to be apart from his daughter, Hiroki Kanzaki shared his troubles with the owner of a coffee shop. It turns out that what had been angering Hiroki Kanzaki was that Miu still refused to reveal the identity of the man she had an affair with. The owner pointed out that Hiroki didn't really want to know the man's identity but wanted to understand his wife's thoughts, what she was protecting, and why. One day, while looking at their chat history, Hiroki Kanzaki suddenly remembered a bookmark that Miu cherished and had been missing. Recalling that Miu had mentioned going to the library to return something, he went to the library on a hunch. There he inquired about his wife with the librarian, and learned that she often volunteered there, having been invited by Mr. Ryou Fuyutsuki, who was also her childhood friend from school. At the same time, a colleague, after being repeatedly rejected by Ryou Fuyutsuki, decided to sort out his feelings and leave the company they started together. Unexpectedly, he learned from a previous event poster that Miu Kanzaki was the wife of Hiroki Kanzaki, a client they were in talks with. Wanting to stand up for Ryou Fuyutsuki, the colleague planned to interview Miu, appreciating her craft work as an excuse, and managed to arrange a meeting through Hiroki Kanzaki. Thus, the four of them met unexpectedly. The colleague straightforwardly expressed that because she had always liked Ryou Fuyutsuki, she could not stand to see him suffer alone, and condemned Miu Kanzaki for being a wife and mother, yet shamelessly having an affair with another man, which she found unforgivable. Knowing she was in the wrong, Miu Kanzaki remained silent in the face of the colleague's accusations. Meanwhile, Hiroki Kanzaki took Ryou Fuyutsuki to the coffee shop where, faced with Hiroki's questions, Ryou Fuyutsuki could not answer and remained silent, head bowed.